Good point, Charles. You tell me.
You'll put Wara on it, you watch.
Wara was
on. Tēnā mino ki a tātou I tēnei ata, kei te whakaro arawa hoki ki a rātou nā mate ko hinga atu. Kei a rātou tēnā no reira, ki ora no ki a tātou. Wikara ki a tātou, keep up. Whakataka te hau ki ke tonga, kia mā kina ki rita, kia mā taratara ki tā. E hi ati ana te ata kura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihe, mauri ora. Cease the winds from the west, cease the winds from the south. Let the breeze blow over the land, let the breeze blow over the ocean. Let the reds of dawn come with sharpened air, a touch of frost, and a promise of glorious day. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Excellent, well done. Are there any apologies today? Are there any apologies? There are none. Looking around. No. Any notices? Yes.
Toro atu te rau aroha ki te whānau Eden, ara Aranui. So just sending our aroha to the whānau of Eni Aranui for her passing on Friday evening. She gave so much service, especially in the Ministry of Social Development section for our community, our marae and our hapu. Kia ora.
Thank you, Henry, for reminding us of that, because we'd slipped past us. Certainly Annie was a rock in our community, a serious loss to her family and to community, so our heartfelt goes out to her family, but also to our community, which will be very difficult to replace. So thank you, Henry, for bringing that up. Any other notices? None. Conflict of interest declarations? There are none, especially for the minutes. Confirmation of the minutes for the February the 24th.
And maybe the minutes be confirmed.
We'll read them. We have a mover. Do we have a seconder? Seconder, Handy Y. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Follow-ups from the previous regional council. Do we have any comments on those?
Chair, so the first first three will come back as further advice in due course, and 4 and 5 there have been some changes in relation to Pedigree Green Arena. I'm sure Mr Dolly could provide further information if council would like it, but essentially the car park has been withdrawn from the project. The car park within the river berm has been withdrawn.
By them?
Correct. They've come up with a new configuration that does not require a car park in the river berm, that has one on the city side of the berm.
Would have been helpful if they had done that. No.
I think the scale of their expansion has been wound back and less ambitious in terms of their future plans.
Thank you, James, for that. That's really interesting. Any other questions or comments in regard to the follow-ups? None. Can I have someone to move that we receive the follow-ups, please?
I'll move that if you like.
Jenny White and Rick, all those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 5, organisation activities through April.
Chair will take these as read.
As read. Questions? Hanny White.
Just on point 1, the 230 riparian sites, how were those selected? Are you able to give us some feedback on that, Ian? Point 1, the 230 riparian sites. How were those selected?
I couldn't tell you exactly how they're selected. I'll find out from the team how they've done that, but I would imagine there'll be some stratification and some randomisation of sites to make sure that information is representative of the region, but I don't know exactly the technical details.
Okay, thank you.
Just, if I may assist, I had a similar inquiry on that, and this is only rural, and you sent info around, maybe you could resend it about those questions and the urban side of it?
Yes, I had, in response to the questions raised about why we went capturing urban information, further information about that, so hopefully we send that.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Mike.
Just two things, Mr Chairman. So one is with regards to the whole region, number 3, East Coast Balanced Farm Environmental Awards. So as an organisation, given our interest in farming practices and wanting to see a change in farming practices that actually encourage environmental outcomes, I kind of asked myself, why isn't this organisation supporting such a program and offering its own award as part of that? Program, or something similar. So we're actually recognising good farming practices that we're trying to actually encourage.
So through you, Chair, we are a cornerstone sponsor of the Balanced Farm Environment Awards, and a number of our staff are involved in the judging panel.
Sure.
And we do, I think usually most years we have a specific award within the awards category, which is the Hawke's Bay Regional Council Award for a specific area.
Glad to hear that. And secondly, Mr Chairman, was just in regards to the actual mechanics of the, are we going to go through this in the various regions? I do have a number of other questions, but they're in...
Sure, yes.
Yep. Rather than jump all over the place.
Craig, then Neil.
Thanks. On 37, like Tutera, information about the is that Kahikanui Stream Bridge, fantastic. Is there any updates there on the drinking water and our ambitions for the campground there, given the lack of drinking water supply now?
Yep, so I'm happy to provide an update on the drinking water supply at the campground. So through sampling, we detected arsenic levels that were above the safe drinking level. So we've turned that source off, and we are trucking water to the tank. So we have a tank there, so we're filling that tank with potable water trucked to site. We've done an analysis, and that, for the time being, appears to be the most cost-effective way to operate that water supply. We only supply 50,000 litres per year at that site, so we're monitoring it, and then we'll respond accordingly. But there should now be potable quality water that we are putting a sign on saying it's non-potable, just like DOC does. So otherwise we would have to manage, chlorinate the tank and constantly manage that water. So although it comes from a potable source, it is placarded as a non-potable
So CEO, we continue to welcome the public using that public amenity that they own, but obviously with the constraints of water. So further to that, on 38, I did ask in another way a couple of meetings ago, I think, can you please give us comfort that you've all cultural issues, sites and special sites to people of the area have been taken into account and are managed insofar when the various logging roads are enhanced and developed?
Yep, so we have mapped all those sites. I understand there's provision in the project to ensure that they're not interrupted.
And you get that confidence from...
I've sat down with our forestry manager and seen them mapped on the site and had discussions around where the skid sites, etc., are in relation to those sites.
And your information about treasured or special sites comes from?
So the development of that harvest plan was done in conjunction with Mangaharuru Tangitu and the local mana whenua in the community, as I understand it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Everyone's satisfied where things are at.
Yes.
Are very important. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just a few questions, starting off in item 12, myrtle rust. I don't know, it sits with you, Ian, does it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just if we could have a brief explanation as to the regional council's involvement in any monitoring or mitigation of myrtle rust in the region, and any assessment of potential compromise to our fauna as a result.
So through you, Chair, the myrtle rust response is led by NPI in partnership with DOC. So we have a supporting role, but the primacy for managing myrtle rust is with UPI. Myrtle rust is reasonably widespread throughout New Zealand, although recently arrived in New Zealand. We actually learned about, we recently learned about this incursion, unfortunately not through direct contact with New Zealand Doc, but through social media, so we're just closing the loop to make sure that we are adequately informed. And it obviously has pretty devastating impacts on plants in the myrtle family, hence what's called myrtle rust, like Hurikala, Manuka, Rata. Those sorts of trees can be impacted. There is a strategy in place which includes R&D to figure out whether there are ways to limit its spread and minimise its impact on plants once it's in an area, but it's still a reasonably new and evolving disease, and the tools in the toolbox are reasonably limited at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Moving to item 32. Obviously, Chris Dolly will be over this one. Modelling for the Tutakuri Naurora River complete. No significant issues to report with regard to the 1 to 500 year event. Can we just have a little expansion on that, or at least identification of when a report would come to council in that regard? I'm sure there are many significant issues to report that we need to be aware of.
Absolutely. So there'll be a full update at the next EICC meeting shortly. In terms of that modelling, it's found that the crest height of the stock banks is okay for a 1 in 500 year event, and we're looking at the resilience of those stock banks to a major event. We've identified 12 areas that require additional work, so we'll bring all that information in detail to the next EICC meeting.
Thank you, Chris. Sorry, Mr. Chair, my last question, not to leave Katrina out. Number 50, Napier City Council operating its municipal wastewater within its consent, abatement notices withdrawn or cancelled. Can you advise in terms of the requirements of the consent around the benthic studies for the coastal marine area? Can you advise when the next benthic study report is due?
Yeah, I'm going to have to get back to you on that, Neil. I don't have that information to hand.
Thank you.
I will.
Thank you, Chair. Just echo the comments, point 3 there on the significance of the Balanced Farm Environment Award Field Day. The notice has been there's to be no utes driven around. It's all by quad or side by side on the day. So I've managed to locate myself a 6-seater side by side and still got 3 seats spare. So if anyone wants a seat to see me at morning tea. Point 59, if I could just ask for a bit of clarification on the land use consents, and 90 landowners sent letters and 90 have responded. What's this sort of summary of those responses? Are they favourable or?
So a lot of the respondents are working with somebody to clear their applications for them. I think there was equally amount of people who hadn't begun to do it. So the good news about that is that they're at least making contact with us and we're in conversation with them and moving in the right direction.
Right.
Michelle?
Oh, mine's just on the, it's associated with the Water District Council wastewater. In the Freedom Camping area below Rangihaua, is near the mouth of the river, there's been an installation of a toilet, and I just want to check if that's gone through any consent process. It's metres away from the waterway.
This is,
What type of toilet is it? I don't know if it's
this is an asset of Wairoa District Councils, and you're asking whether it has been consented?
Yeah, if it's gone through a consent process because of its proximity to the coastline.
What item is this? Sorry, Chair, I can't quite follow where it is.
So it's not an item on here? This-
Not an item on here, but I'm just it's in the Wairu area, and I'm concerned.
So a minor item.
Would that, if it's so close to the coastal margin, would it have needed a resource consent?
Can you raise?
We'll follow that up.
Oh, yeah, no, he'll follow it up and show it. But rightly, that would just
It's
be
just
raised.
below the oxidation pond.
That would be raised on minor items. Any other questions? Mike?
Just one, 26, thank you. Staff are preparing a S42A report. What's an S42A?
So that's a officer's report in relation to submissions heard through the process. It's a standard officer's report in a consenting or hearings process.
Thank you.
Yep.
If there's no other more questions, we have someone to move to receive Rick and Sheriff. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Minor items not on the agenda. You don't need to re-raise that one, Michelle. Api?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's with regards to the MACA hearings, just wondering if we could, I don't have anything to bring forward. I wanted to call for a report.
Just give us a heading.
A summary on the MACA hearings.
MACA hearing. Anyone else? Sheriff?
Burning issue.
Burning issue. Well done, Sheriff. Any other minor items? Michelle, do you have one?
Ohani Parker Stream. Charlie, do you want to talk about
Oni Parker Stream?
Maunga
Nope.
Oh, well, I'll speak about Maunga Taniwha
The old Mangataniwha. Okay.
Forest Reserve.
Okay. Was there anyone else? Sometimes we have none. This time we have 4, is it? Okay, thank you very much. Now, before we just go to decision items, I just want to acknowledge John Huggins, who's sitting at the back. And I have a little backup. So I'll come to you, John. What you got there?
Oh, very nice.
Well, I've been waiting for you to turn up, mate. Plenty of places like So, well, everybody knows John. Everybody in Hawke's Bay knows John because he's been here for forever and ever. So I first met him when I was doing the procurement job for Watties, and John was at Watties, and he was just amazing. The CEO of Watties, who was David Irving, was there at the time, and he said, and Barry Davis will recall all those old days, and they were driving Watties and driving the brand, but actually if you wanted to know anything, if you wanted to know where something was in the system or a bit of the history, they would tell you to go to John. He was such an invaluable staff member of Watties, which of course is iconic company in our wiki. But he has other interests, and he has attended council meetings, Hastings District Council and our council, and probably Napier. Do you attend Napier too? Napier as well. He's a regular attendee, and I just wanted to acknowledge his interest from the community and his role he's taken to hold us to account. In the old days, he would often ask us questions, and he was always a person that was there representing his community and holding elected officials to account. So I just want to thank you for your wonderful work that you've done over the years, attending all these meetings. And I'm sure you have boxes of notes. I know you have boxes of notes. So I want to give you the small certificate of appreciation and give you a chance to address council. Do you want to say anything?
I can't stand up because I've got a titanium left leg. Bionic man. I don't want to fall again and do that, but I'm still on the rest home. I'm in Brittany House. wouldn't believe it's address, King Street, Taradale. So one of the old agricultural researchers, Galeen, he says write a book about from King Street, Hastings, number 349, I think it is, King Street, Taradale, 71, 48 years in the bay. I've helped your nephew, Riley, with the diabetes. Diabetes New Zealand, which I joined in 1987 when I was diagnosed with insulin dependent for the rest of my life, just like I've been given that buggy by the Department of Health for the rest of my life, they say. Yes, diabetes youth is not recognised by AIM section, so I helped set up diabetes youth in New Zealand in your nephew.
Yeah. I should have told you before I ate the biscuits.
Not O'Reilly, Riley. Camp, etc.
And you should see John how he brings his notes. He always keeps all our records and he watches us on the TV when he can't make it. So John, I've got a big agenda to get through, so I better keep moving.
Thanks.
And yeah, I guess you can hang that up in the rest time. Let you do that.
Hang it up with this one because it can't come left. Yeah.
Okay, so we will move to item 7, decision item. And who's leading us off on that, James?
So, look, I'll make some opening remarks, Chair. It is my pleasure to present to Council the policies and supporting information for the proposed 2021 to 2031 long-term plan for community consultation. This vast body of work represents over 9 months of hard work by councillors, which has started with a good number of workshops and deliberations and a huge amount of refinement of this work over many months. I just want to pay tribute to the large body of work undertaken by staff, particularly in our finance team, the asset management team in relation to the infrastructure strategy and all the asset management planning, and to our strategy and governance team who have overseen and led this process, and also to our marketing communications team who have worked to present this material in a manner which is digestible to the community. We did develop this from the ground up, so there has been a comprehensive review of all of the levels of service undertaken by Council and a comprehensive review of all budgets for all activities. All new proposals were put through a business case process and were challenged by senior management and councillors on the way through, and we have left no stone unturned in terms of looking at the organisation's fitness for purpose to deliver on both its statutory mission and on the aspirations of the community as represented by Council. That process has responded to some very large drivers which weigh upon the Council's business, the most significant of which is freshwater reform and the requirements of the National Policy Statement on Freshwater Management that does require this Council over the next 3 years to comprehensively review the Regional Resource Management Plan and set water quality and quantity limits for every water body in the region, and all of the associated land coastal rules that will need to support that. That requires an enormous effort in the next 3 years by our planning team. It will require additional work by consents right through compliance, our science effort, and that will complement the work that this Council is doing on water security, which is provided for in this proposed long-term plan, as well as the specific item of consultation around additional investment in water efficiency and conservation. So across the entire work program, we have a comprehensive set of initiatives and interventions to position the region far more confidently in relation to managing our freshwater resources. The plan also proposes increased investment in our biodiversity enhancement work, and indeed that would be complemented by the Ahuriri Regional Park proposal, which is included for consultation. Of course, climate change is a priority for this council and is at the heart of everything that we do. And so what I'm pleased to say is that this plan that we have presented today and will take to the community does provide an opportunity for this council to support our community in being much more resilient to the future threats of climate change, most notably in relation to flood risk. So it does provide for a major investment in capital expenditure over the first 2 years of the long-term plan to significantly upgrade the resilience of our flood protection efforts in the Heretaunga Plains, but also in the upper Tukituki, and the gravel extraction element of that is part of the specific consultation as well. Climate change, of course, is not just an adaptation question for the region, but it's also a mitigation challenge, and so I'm pleased that the package that we're putting forward includes enhancement to our public transport offering by way of trialling the on-demand service, increased funding to support our current bus service and make that more financially sustainable, and increased investment in our cycle network as well. It does also include, of course, an ambassador on climate change to engage the community in climate change mitigation efforts. And look, it also proposes a pilot around the Right Tree, Right Place, which will aim to put significantly larger numbers of trees into our farming landscapes, complementary with our farming systems, that will sequester carbon, improve water quality, and improve the resilience of our landscapes to the effects of climate change. So all of that combined is a relatively short summary of what is a massive amount of work that is planned over the next 3 years, and that will come at a cost to the community. So we are proposing a step change in both activity and investment by our council to the tune of $10 million additionally of operating expenditure in year one of the long-term plan, and that's about a 20% increase in activity by this council. It builds on the step change that this council embarked on in the 2018 long-term plan, and what I'm pleased to say is that this time in this long-term plan we are presenting council and the community with a corporate plan to support that growth in activity. It's fair to say that the growth in the organisation that we've encountered over the last few years will continue and has presented some significant challenges in terms of our ability to service the community in a customer-friendly manner and to have the requisite assets and technology to support the growth of the organisation. So the corporate plan is an essential underpinning of this long-term plan that provides for, in part, a significant investment in our information and communications technology. So $30 million worth of capital expenditure is set aside over the life of the long-term plan for IT, and that recognises the increasing digital enablement of this organisation, the fact this organisation is fundamentally about data and information and engaging our communities with that data and information, and this long-term plan provides the resourcing to do that in a modern and effective way, and also in a way which will future-proof the organisation over the coming years. So we have laid out the plans for this further step change in activity and the underpinning resources in terms of the organisational infrastructure to deliver that additional activity. It is comprehensive, it is well considered, and I just again would pay tribute to the work by councillors over the last 9 months to sift through large amounts of information and refine this down into what is a comprehensive package for the future resilience of our community. And so with that, obviously, we will be taking this to the community next week as we launch the formal consultation phase, and we look forward to discussion with our community over these proposals and receiving their submissions and hearing their views as we refine what we will be doing. So that's just context from me. I don't know, Jess, whether you, Desiree, wanted to make anything?
But nothing to add on the supporting information. We do have some minor adjustments to the consultation document, which we'd like to take you through. Those just arose from the HOT review, the audit enacted over the last couple of days. So I'm not sure if you want to consider the policies and supporting information first, and then we can take you through the audit opinion and the consultation document.
I'm not sure. You want to add to this document we've got in front of us?
Not the first item, just the second item on the consultation document.
Perhaps we'll deal with 7 first.
Yeah.
So get through the adoption of the policies and supporting information, and then we can deal with the consultation document after that.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. So, quick, Neil, you'll move. Thank you, Neil. Craig, would you second this?
I will, and yes, thanks. And
Okay, we're going to move in a second. Neil, would you like to speak?
Yeah, just very briefly, Mr Chair, and I think all councillors will appreciate the energy and effort that's gone in. In my experience, a very, very thorough and rigorous process followed, and thanks to the finance team and the planning team for pulling this together. This was probably the most difficult long-term plan exercise I've ever experienced, the most thorough in terms of its examination, and the public ratepayers in particular can be, I guess, comforted. I don't know if it's quite the right term when they're writing the cheque for it, but we went through extremely long list of wishes and wants, and we pared that right back to our core expenditures, our core purpose, and I'm very pleased to see that we were able to do that and focus particularly on protecting the whenua, protecting the land. Ratepayers will also note, and I've got big decisions in front of them, the additional expenditure in terms of engaging in partnership with Māori. That's seen there in the corporate services line item, about 1.1 million directly, but across the whole range of expenditures, the inputs and involvement of Māori and water issues, for example, demonstrate, if you like, a new horizon. The 10-year horizon is a much more focused and contemplative approach for Māori engagement. So I'm very pleased to see that as a part of this long-term plan. But finally, Mr Chair, an extraordinary effort on staff, by staff, in pulling this together and helping councillors to understand the issues and come up with a comprehensive range of for the long-term 10-year horizon. So I'm interested to hear the public feedback on this, but it's the best we can deliver at this point in these circumstances.
Thank you, Neil. Craig?
thanks, and reiterate what Councillor Curtin just said there, and acknowledge my colleagues and particularly staff to get to where we've got to. I particularly enjoy the way this version is laid out, the transparency. Under any measure, when you see a headline of a proposed rate increases, you do take a step back and maybe a bit of a grimace, but then you look at what we're proposing, and I'll put on the record that I am very comforted with the ambitions of this council, very ambitious to deliver on our environmental aspirations. The introductory comments by the Chair and CEO, action now to protect our future, and our long-term plan here, an honest reflection of we probably should have done a bit more in the past. We're not appointing blame in any way, we're just saying, hey, but we're going to take it on ourselves to do as much as we can now to fix, first and foremost, those things that are negatively impacting our environment and therefore the place which we love and treasure. Mr Chair, I'm looking forward to feedback. I will be using my social media to encourage feedback on any item whatsoever. I have my particular favourites, but I'll save those for another day. There has been, for the public, give and take around this table on some of those things which we are putting resources into. But by and large, I think the public should take great comfort that this council is united on this plan and where we've landed. And actually, there's a few courageous decisions in there to help turn the wheel and to do those things that the public expect of us. So, Mr Chair, thanks. I'm very, very pleased to be able to second this.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Kia ora. You know, this has been a demonstrous amount of mahi that's been done. Us councillors have spent 15 or so workshops, which means staff have, times that by 20. So thank you to our lead teams, our GMs, our CE, for bringing this to us. And I think we have rebuilt, we've reset from the bottom. We know it's been hard for staff and their teams to actually criticise their own programs of work and try to help us as councillors to make better informed decisions on what are our levels of service and what are those measures, and are we doing what's expected of us and what is right. I'm also comforted in the independent auditor's report that talks about the fair, that this document fairly represents the matters proposed for inclusion of the long-term plan. It identifies and explains the main issues and choices facing the council and region and the consequences of those choices. So for me, that's very comforting that we've done all that we can to put out to the public for them to have a voice and come back to us around where do we go for the next 10 years. And I endorse all the projects that have been in here. I'm thankful to our tangata whenua representation who have given us feedback throughout the whole process around the direction they want to see set for our region. And, I'm supportive of it being called kia rite, time to act, because that's where we sit now, and that's what we want to see for the future of the region. So kia ora.
Anyway, any other speakers? Martin?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to take this opportunity to respond to something I heard a former Cabinet Minister, Amy Adams, say about local government rate increases that are rolling out across the country. I'm acutely alive to the concern at the burden that we are putting on ratepayers through rate increases, and it doesn't fill me with any pleasure at all to have to put out to the public a signalled 19.5% rate increase, albeit that some 8% of that is deferred from last year. But I do think it is really important to respond to two propositions put by Amy Adams. The first was a suggestion that we simply draw up a list of things we'd like to do and then figure out a way to pay for it. And she made the point that central government wouldn't do that. There's lots of things central government would like to do, but doesn't. And the second point she made was that despite years of underperformance, and I think she was referring to infrastructure deficits that we've seen, say, in Wellington, we think we can justify some form of a pay rise. Well, as to the first point, neither central government nor indeed any business has such a long list of directions to it in legislation from Wellington as to what we must do. These are not matters of choice. This was not a case of drawing up a list of things we'd like to do. We put the blowtorch on a list of things that came to us from staff as imperative to meet our statutory obligations, which they had themselves put through the lion's den. And we went through them not once, not twice, not three, but sometimes, 4 times to check that they were all required and squeeze that rock. But in terms of this idea that we've been underperforming and now seeking a pay rise, there has been not only a deficit across the country in terms of infrastructure investment, particularly at territorial level, but a real legacy. And Mr. Chair, you often speak of this, of well-intended but poor decisions made by previous generations as to land and resource use, and we just now need to face up to that and deal with that. The last long-term plan started that ball rolling, and now we're picking up the momentum. So, yeah, it doesn't fill me with any pleasure that there's a rate increase, but this is not a case of choice. This is a case of necessity. I am very conscious of the burden that it places on our ratepayers, and I'll be looking through our subsequent rate review process for ways that we can deliver greater equity in terms of ability to sustain that impact. The last thing, I just want to touch on a couple of aspects of this that are really important to me. Firstly, right tree, right place. I would like that to be even more ambitious. Sediment is the super stressor. We have 3 million tonnes of sediment being released into the sea from Hawke's Bay every year. That is just an extraordinary statistic. And, this is a way that we can start dialling back some of the decisions of previous generations. This is not, as the plan says, about planting pine trees over productive farmland. It is about retiring marginal slopes that are prone to erosion. That will be better for the bottom lines of farmers and for the region's water quality. The other thing I'm very excited about is the on-demand pilot trial. In addition to the climate change imperative, there is a real equity of access to transport in this region. We are not well served by public transport. We have a wonderful fleet of bus drivers who do an incredible job and acted heroically through the COVID. This is not about that, but we need to adapt and provide a form of public transport that means that people who struggle to get about, who can't afford a car, who can't afford petrol, can actually get somewhere on time or reasonably on time in a reasonably convenient way. So I'm really, really excited about that project, and that's really all I wanted to say, Mr. Chairman, but happy to support the adoption of this long-term plan and supporting documents for consultation. With all of that said, thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, I absolutely support all the comments thus far, especially in regards to the workload, heavy workload on everybody, and also in regards to correcting what would have been termed custom and practices of the past, which we are now, if you like, having to rectify the outcomes of that. I really just wanted to return back to the comment in regards to tangata whenua engagement and the investment that has been made. I just really wanted to point out that actually the investment that has been made in this current long-term plan and what has been proposed going forward, that the investment has actually been about capacity building within this organisation. It hasn't been about improving tangata whenua engagement per se. It is about the council having the ability to first and foremost understand the aspirations, the concerns that come from tangata whenua to this entity. Then having the capacity within the organisation to actually process those concerns. In the past, it hasn't been here. So I absolutely support the Regional Council on the journey it has undertaken, especially in the last 4 years. It has really put some muscle behind its own ability and around its capacity to deal with tangata whenua issues. I think the real challenge for this council going forward is how do they now turn around and support tangata whenua to actually fulfil Hawke's Bay Regional Council's obligations to consult with tangata whenua. Because at the end of the day, despite the treaty settlements, resources back on the ground, back on a hapu marae whānau level, are still minimal. And that's where the engagement has to take place. It still needs to be resourced. I'm not saying that it's solely the duty of Hawke's Bay Regional Council, but Hawke's Bay Regional Council does have a part to play in that going forward. Kia ora tātou.
I'd like to firstly start by saying thank you to the staff for the quality of the documents that were put forward to us, the quality of their advice. I think this reflects a significant step forward in the intellectual capability of this organisation, and I'm really pleased about that. I want to also make a point that I think this is, despite the increase, a very modest increase given the enormity of what faces this council. There are a huge list of legacy issues which we're required to address, and we have not dealt with them as quickly or thoroughly as we might do, striking compromise between what the ratepayer will see as affordable and what the ratepayer is prepared to pay. On the other side, the pressure from people to improve the quality of the physical environment. Certainly no wish list here. I want to refer to the point that Martin's made, that people seem to think that we just dream up a wish list and get it. One which I'll point to is in the environment and climate change. Climate change is the big issue which confronts us in the future. It is, without a doubt, not just the elephant in the room, it's the elephant in the backyard. The climate is changing dramatically. And what we have here is we have allocated one person. That's what we've done, one person. And this thing, the climate change ambassador. One person. For the whole of this province, to have influence on mitigation of climate change factors. Well, I wouldn't have thought that's much at all. I'd have thought that is actually too little. I'd have thought that's could be categorised as being in the realm of reorganising the deck chairs on the Titanic. This is not really a serious attempt to deal with that. So it is a nudge and a push in the right direction, I give it that, but it is well short of what I think this serious issue deserves and is entitled to. More importantly, what we should be putting forward for future generations. We need to do our bit, not just on adaptation for climate change, which we're doing, but also on mitigation. So I see this as reasonably a very modest document indeed. There's no overreach here at all. In fact, I could categorise it as underreach. But we have pressure from our ratepayers about what they're prepared to pay for and what we can do. And I think that's got us to about the limit there. So that we have to deal with the past and look to the future, and we've done a bit of both. This is not an outrageous document. This is what is best we can do here today in these circumstances.
Thank you, Rick. Will?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, just like to thank staff, just the amount of work that must have gone into getting to this point when, we've had our workshops, our discussions and looked at the size of some of the papers and books and documents that are being put in front of us. So, so thank you for getting us to this stage. I guess I approach this with a bit of nervousness because I don't agree this is modest. I think this is massive. And so I look forward to and a plea to my constituents to provide as much feedback, good or bad, I guess, to give me the confidence, in the direction we're heading. I guess, I look to, particularly the finances around this document, the debt levels. In year 3, we're looking to be at a peak in terms of our debt to revenue ratio, which is a ratio we're governed by. Year 3 will be time for the next long-term plan. So the next council sitting around this table will no doubt have their own list of new things to add, and debt won't be a tool available to them because of that ratio. And so the only thing that's left is to keep increasing rates well above the rate of inflation, which just is not sustainable. So look, I raise those issues that do concern me, and so I look forward to this process. I approve of this draft and look forward to the consultation ahead.
So before I hand back to Neil, is it Gareth or Charlie wish to say anything?
Mr. Chair.
Oh, I didn't see you, sorry.
Yeah, if I could just put on a plug for Waira at this point. I know, we haven't had that much going on in Waira a few years ago, but this next couple of years is going to be really important for our own district. The focus has always been on the Tuki plan and everything else, but now that we're moving into the Mohaka plan change right now, and then going into the Waira and environmental stuff, I think we're going to be winners over the next 3 years. The right tree, right place, I agree. If anything's washing off our Whenua Moor, it's all our Wairau land, it's washing out to sea. So I think Wairau should be able to take a bit of heart out of this next few years, and certainly we have a place in the long-term plan. I also look at our transport, where there's a lot going to be going on in Wairau in the next couple of years over the Waikari River, or the cutting out the gorge. They're working on Rapinga right now. They're relining the single lane bridge on State Highway 2 up at Manitai. A lot of things happening in Mahia and the dropouts up there, and got a new road in the Mahia district in Nilhaka, which we would never have got if it wasn't for the Provincial Grace Fund probably. There's a couple of farmers up there that would have had to take the long way home for the next few years. So I think there's some really good things in there for the Wairau people and Hawke's Bay at large. Our focus on the environment is going to be, well, it's not there to penalise people, it is there for the environment. So I think we're going to be looking pretty good in a couple of years.
Charlie. I'll go to Jeff and then come back to you. Jeff?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sitting through this whole process over the last 8 to 9 months, I'm amazed about the capability of our staff and the work that they have done, the material that they've presented to us, and it's all been said before. But once again, I just want to reiterate that they've done a fantastic job. Especially as a new councillor, it's amazing how complex our business is and how difficult it is. And especially with us having to make the decision last year as a council not to increase rates, but actually put a rate holiday on. At the time, we didn't know what our economy was going to look like, either the New Zealand economy or the world economy, and we've done extremely well. However, we do have some issues due to COVID. One thing that I do see in this long-term plan is it's not just one person. It actually, everything we do as a council, there's two things that we always look at, whether we actually have included tangata whenua and see their views in it, but also whether this actually is a climate change wise decision. And I see that right through. I won't talk about my pet projects that I see that should have happened in this plan. Everybody's well aware of those pet projects, and yes, water is definitely one of those, and I think it's very important. And the second thing really is sediment loading, and I totally agree with Martin. That is really our bane for our environment, and we need to resolve that, and by doing that we will actually solve a whole lot of issues. So once again, thank you very much for the staff, and maybe we haven't been courageous enough and to put some more additional work into this, but hopefully we'll have time in time to do so. So thank you very much for that.
Jeff, Uppy.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou katoa ngā rangatahi no mai nei. Thank you for your comments. Absolutely right. Every local territorial authority and every regional authority has been under the pump over the last bit in a while, and that often is concealed by, like a duck, our staff have been going flat out beneath the water. And so this LTP, for me, I've only been working closely with this council for around 5 years, and this for me was a wonderful extension of a growing relationship between iwi and HPRC. We are starting to see a greater alignment of whakaaro and allocation of resources in order for us to be able to achieve our shared outcomes. We all know the work ahead of us has got a long way to go, and I've got a lot of growing and learning to do, and so does this organisation, and so does Wairoa. But we're prepared to undertake that learning, and so we look forward to what the future holds. With regards to the challenges this council has faced around budget constraints and the levels of service, your choices have been incredibly hard. You have, and your staff have, a huge task ahead of you. But I think the indications set out here, despite the increases, show good positive leadership from this council and good growing strong relationships at a community level. And so I look forward to how we operationalise this plan and how we activate our communities to bring about an environmental change. With regards to Member Paku's kōrero and comments around expressions in the plan towards growing our Māori partnerships team, I would concur and support those comments, knowing full well that we need to build a capacity within ourselves before we can help others. And so it has been an interesting and exciting and sometimes very frustrating journey to walk alongside the council, but nonetheless we walk on. So to our Māori partnerships team, to our chief executive and to this council, thank you for building this space and enabling us to create relationships which strengthen our ability to deliver on these outcomes. For me personally, and on behalf of those iwi I represent, I look forward to the day that we're able to put down those partnerships as our business as usual activities, rather than something we set aside in the LTP like a separate activity. We'll get there, and I believe we will. And so the cost pressures on our community are well considered in this plan, and our community is cognizant of those increasing pressures, and we know There are a heck of a lot more coming in the next 12 months. And so I look forward to working with our mana whenua back in Wairoa and our iwi groups to help give mauri to this plan and to continue to grow our relationship. So ngā mihi nui ki a koutou katoa to our staff, to the councillors for the work and the formation that this represents. Kia ora.
Michelle, besides me, you're the only one who hasn't spoken. Do you wish to say anything?
I'm just the right tree, right place. I think that's how it's how I ended up on here. Looking at the issues with our river, and when Martin mentioned the 3 million tonnes of sedimentation, well, Api and Api said, oh well, I thought that's probably us, probably Wairoa. A lot of our, and then also had Charlie mentioned a lot of our soil is in the awa, and that's a concern to us. That's our main concern. So it's about putting the right trees in the right place, and moving away from that pine tree cloak and putting the right cloak of Papatūānuku back on the whenua. And it's probably what got me here. The other thing is, you watch the environment and you watch what's happening to the environment, and the sedimentation load is the biggest problem for Wairoa, but also just not good when you're looking at the stock standing in the waterways. They're not fenced off, they're just adding to the issues and the point discharges. So just wanted to add that. And right throughout the whole workshops, thank you to the staff. Appreciate being able to zoom in sometimes, because they were like hui nearly every week. And you're coming from Wairoa, trying to save on those emissions. But yeah, always commented that I'm got to take note for our people, the impact that it will have on the increase in rates when they're already struggling as it is. And just to add to that, if you want to know how much they're struggling, we've got 85 whānau back home who are homeless. So increase in rates, it's going to be just more problems for them. But kia ora.
Thank you, Michelle. Neil, before I hand back to you, I'd like to make a couple of comments myself. So this has been a huge body of work that our staff have had to do. And as a council, we're not always the easiest people to get on with. We are very involved and deeply entrenched in all these issues, and so it brings a whole lot more complexities to our staff. So I just want to thank them on behalf of the council and on behalf of our community for getting this huge body of work across the line. But I do also want to thank the council, because despite your complexities and your idiosyncrasies, you have shown real courage.
Name them.
You have shown real courage here in facing the issues. And they're not issues which you made. They are issues which you have inherited, whether you inherited them over the last 2 years or the last 5 years, or Neil, who's been around for a long time, longer than that.
Longer than that.
Even he inherited these issues. These are issues that were created 50 and 100 years ago. Rivers were changed, farming practices weren't as good as they perhaps could have been. We deforested faster than anyone in the history of the world. We did a whole lot of really stupid, dumb things. And this is the legacy which you have had to face, and I want to congratulate you, and I'm really proud of you that you have faced them with courage, because this is the second big rate rise that we've gone to the community with. And I take Will's, I'm very conscious of Will's worries and concerns, because a lot of the people in his ruhi will be stuck with some very high rates increases. So, because it isn't evenly spread across the community. So thank you very much. I think you've done an absolutely marvellous job, and I will hand back to Neil on that to wind us up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in summing up, I would like also to congratulate my colleagues around some very considered commentary on this long-term plan, our 10-year destination. We've had two, if you like, competing scenarios in front of us, and that is to do more and the other is to spend less. And that's always the complication we face. And the reality is, for local government, our feet are closest to the flame. We're the ones that wear the odium of our community, and Will's quite correct. You know, we have to front up to those people writing large bills, those people often in very poor circumstances, having to write even what we would consider a modest bill. We have to front to them. And it really concerns me, picking up on the comment from Councillor Williams, that we've got these vast array of compulsory obligations on council, and the implication and narrative that floats around central government or the Beltway, the Wellington set, the smartasses like Joel Maxwell, who says that something's rotten in the state of our councils. Well, go take a hike.
Yeah.
What we're seeing is competent, careful consideration by this council. And if you want to demonstrate where the rot lies, one needs to look at central government policy settings to have confirmation of that. Just take one look at the state of housing in New Zealand. Take one look, for example, at the state of our health system. Try and get an appointment. Just take one look at child poverty and see that the policy settings by our Joel and his colleagues leave a lot to be desired. And we are dealing with a legacy, for example, central policy making, which a few decades ago slashed and burned our whenua, incentivised that, and now we're facing the challenge of sedimentation as a result. So in summing up, Mr Chair, I reject the notion that the people closest to the ground, that there's something rotten in the state of our local government. They are simply wrong, and when you point the finger, there's always two pointing back at you, and in this case they are pointing directly at those commentators in the narrative coming out of Wellington that somehow we're not doing the competent job that we are. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Neil. Now, Craig, you did speak, didn't you? We don't. He's the wind up. So I'm not going
to. True to form. He always winds us up.
Yeah. So we're not going to go to any other speakers. We have a mover and a seconder. We've all spoken on this matter. All those in favour of the recommendations as in the paper.
Aye.
Aye. Against? It's unanimously carried. Thank you very much. Now we are going to. I need someone to move us into public excluded because we have Lawrence here. Will.
We'll come back to the CD, I think, after.
In a second.
Yeah.
And you will move, help us.
Seconded.
All those in favour, we move into public excluded?
Aye.
Right. So we are going to have to clear the public and all the staff.
Yes.
Um,
Just give me a